Hello everyone, hi. So welcome to a new session. So it is just a week away, and today I thought I would bring in some mixed questions for a wide range of practice. Till the Friday we were just doing British literature, but today we will also do South Asian literature, right? And also British literature. And I also have a big announcement for you all, so stay tuned. And so now let's get started. Right. So the screen is visible. Right. So here is your first question. Tennyson was born in the year dash 1809, 1812, 1808, or 1800. I'm starting with a question on year because chronology is again very important. They can also ask you chronology based on the birth year of the authors. So be very careful. Yes. So in which year was Tennyson born? Tell me. Tennyson was born in which year? Tennyson was one of the most popular and prominent Victorian poets. He's regarded as the embodiment of the Victorian era, right? Yes. So Tennyson was born in the year 1809. 1809. Okay. So Alfred Tennyson, first Baron Tennyson, was an English poet. He was the poet laureate during much of Queen Victoria's reign. In 1829, Tennyson was awarded the Chancellor's Gold Medal at Cambridge for one of his finest pieces, Timbuktu. He published his first solo collection of poems chiefly lyrical, in 1830, Claribel and Mariana, which remain some of Tennyson's most celebrated poems, were included in this volume of poems chiefly lyrical. Which poems? Claribel and Mariana. Okay. Although described by some critics as overly sentimental, his verse soon proved popular and brought Tennyson to the attention of well-known writers of the day, including Coleridge. Tennyson's early poetry, with its medievalism and powerful visual imagery, was a major influence on the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Okay? So be very careful about the years, right? Let's move on to the next question, shall we? The Lotus Eater. It's a short story by Dash in 1935, and it is loosely based on the life story of John Ellingham Brooks. So who wrote this short story, The Lotus Eater? Joseph Conrad, W. Somerset Maugham, Saki, or G.K. Chesterton? Who wrote the short story, The Lotus Eater? We know The Lotus Eater is also a poem by Tennyson, but who wrote the short story, The Lotus Eater? Tell me. Is it Conrad or Somerset Maugham or Saki or G.K. Chesterton? Short stories are also very important. You will get at least one or two questions from this area of short stories. So do look up the short stories as well. Yes, it is by Somerset Maugham, right? The Lotus Eater, it's a short story by W. Somerset Maugham in 1935, and it is loosely based on the life story of John Ellingham Brooks. It was included in the 1940 collection of Maugham stories, The Mixture as Before. The Mixture as Before, it's a collection of short stories by Maugham, right? Next question. Laila is a 2017 Indian dystopian novel by Dash. Set in the 2040s, the story follows Shalini, who tries to find her missing daughter Laila in a totalitarian regime. So who wrote this dystopian novel? Amitabh Bagchi, Prayag Akbar, Anuradha Roy, or Anis Salim? Tell me. Who wrote this dystopian novel, Laila? Yes? Right. So Laila is a 2017 Indian dystopian novel by Prayag Akbar. It's a dystopian novel by Prayag Akbar. Set in the 2040s, the story follows Shalini, who tries to find her missing daughter Laila in a totalitarian regime. Okay? So it is in the late 2040s. Drinking water and fresh air are luxuries. India is ruled by the council. Shalini is married to Rizwan Chaudhary, a Muslim man with whom she has a daughter, Laila. One day, Rizwan is abducted and killed by goons known as repeaters in an attempt to cleanse the bloodlines and stop interfaith marriages. Okay, so Laila, it's a very important work. It's a dystopian novel by Prayag Akbar. Do look up the contemporary novels, right, of India and the contemporary Indian novelists. Their important works, their prize-winning works. Okay, clear? Let's move on to the next question. Kholdo, open it. It's a short story by Dash on partition. So tell me, who wrote this short story on partition? Is it Sadat Hasan Manto or Amrita Pritam or Ismat Chugtai or none of the above? This person was a very famous writer of short stories on partition. He has written lots of works on partition, especially short stories and short story collections. Yes. Right. It is by Sadat Hasan Manto. So Sadat Hasan Manto's short story Kholdo, or Open It. It captures the gruesome days when women could not even escape the lusty claws of their co-religionists. It talks about the horrors of partition, the violence that women faced during the days of partition. It's a very poignant short story which captures the horrors of partition, the violence that was unleashed in the name of religion. Right? Sadat Hasan Manto. Okay. Next. Moth Smoke. It's a debut novel by British Pakistani novelist Dash, published in 2000. It tells the story of Darashiko Shehzad, a banker in Lahore, Pakistan, who loses his job, falls in love with his best friend's wife, and plunges into a life of drugs and crime. So who wrote this novel, Moth Smoke? Hanif Qureshi, Mohsin Hamid, Zulfikar Ghosh, or Ayad Akhtar? Who wrote this novel? It is by? He also wrote works like Exit West. It is by Mohsin Hamid. Mohsin Hamid wrote Moth Smoke. And it tells the story of Darashiko Shehzad, a banker in Lahore, Pakistan, who loses his job and he falls in love with his best friend's wife. And thereafter, he plunges into a life of drugs and crime. Okay, Mohsin Hamid, Hanif Qureshi, Zulfikar Ghosh, all of them are very important writers. To look up the important works they have written, right? The themes they have explored in their works. Okay. Yes, all of you are correct. All of you are giving answers correctly. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this is the big announcement, I think, which we all have been waiting for. So as you all know, NET is just a week away, right? NET exam is just a week away. So from tomorrow onwards, right? From tomorrow onwards till 14th of June, we are starting our NET JRF countdown on YouTube. The session will start from 8 p.m. and it will continue till 10 p.m. So please note the time. From tomorrow onwards, there will be our NET JRF countdown sessions from 8 p.m. onwards. So don't forget to tune in at 8 p.m. from tomorrow onwards. And so just note the date and time and don't miss these sessions. These 2-hour sessions will be a life savior for you all, because these sessions will give you very thorough revisions on all the topics, starting from British literature, literary theory, criticism, Indian literature, and paper 1 as well, right? Jobin sir will do the paper 1 sessions, right? And ma'am will join us for the paper 2 sessions from tomorrow onwards from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So don't forget to tune in from tomorrow at 8. Right, so I hope you will all come from tomorrow, right? So let's move on. Next, Big Match poem. It describes the situation caused by the Black July riots and pogrom in Sri Lanka, and is based on real events that took place in 1983. So this poem, Big Match, is written by whom? It is Nihal de Silva or Shehana Karuntilaka, Sham Selvadurai or Yasmin Gunaratne. Who wrote this poem, Big Match, which talks about the situation of the Black riots and pogrom in Sri Lanka, which happened in 1983. Okay, Big Match poem. Who wrote this poem? Obviously, it's a poet from Sri Lanka, right? It is Yasmin Gunaratne. Yasmin Gunaratne was a Sri Lankan poet, short story writer, university professor and essayist. She was recognized in Sri Lanka, Australia, throughout Europe, and the United States due to her substantial creative and critical publications in the field of English and post-colonial literature. After 35 years in Australia, she returned to live in Sri Lanka. Okay. Gunaratne founded the literary journal New Ceylon Writing in 1970 to publish creative writing of Sri Lankan writers in English. It's a very important point. So Yasmin Gunaratne founded the literary journal New Ceylon Writing in 1970. Okay. And her poem Big Match, it describes the situation caused by the Black July riots in Sri Lanka. And this poem is based on the events that took place in 1983. Her poetry also won acclaim with several collections of poetry published, including The Lizard's Cry. Please note down the poetry collections of Yasmin Gunaratne. The Lizard's Cry, Word, Bird, Motif, 6,000-Foot Death Dive, Celebrations and Departures. These are some of the most famous poetry collections of the Sri Lankan poet Yasmin Gunaratne. Clear? Okay. And her first novel, A Change of Skies. Again, very important. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Pauline, a fragment of a confession. It is the first published poem by Dash. It was written in 1832 and published anonymously in 1833. The poem is the confession of an unnamed poet to his lover, the eponymous woman, Pauline. It was first reprinted 1868 with no alterations to the text. So who wrote this work? Pauline, a fragment of a confession. Pauline, a fragment of a confession. It was published anonymously. Who wrote this poem? Robert Browning or G.M. Hopkins or William Morris or D.G. Rossetti. Who wrote this poem? It is by Robert Browning. Robert Browning. Okay. Right. Robert Browning has written so many poems. Do look up his poems, his dramatic monologues. Be very careful about the years of his poetry collections, right? Because chronology, again, is very important for any writer, for their works. Next, The City and Its Uncertain Walls. It's a novel written by Dash that was released in April 13, 2023. So who wrote the novel, The City and Its Uncertain Walls? And it's a very recent novel. So is it Yasunari Kawabata, Kobo Abe, Yukio Mishima, or Haruki Murakami? As you can see, it's a Japanese writer, right? Who wrote this novel? The City and Its Uncertain Walls. Tell me, who wrote this novel? The City and Its Uncertain Walls. It is by Haruki Murakami. Haruki Murakami. Haruki Murakami is such a prolific novelist, right? He has written so many novels. Please do look up the list of his novels and be very careful again about the chronology, right? Which novel was published when, and be very careful about the titles. Don't get confused with the titles, okay? So The City and Its Uncertain Walls, it's a novel written by the Japanese writer Haruki Murakami. Haruki Murakami. Okay. Next. Pipa Passes is a dash by Robert Browning. So what is it? Is it a dramatic monologue or verse drama or lyric poem or sonnet? Pipa Passes is a dash by Robert Browning. What is it? Tell me the form. Is it a dramatic monologue or verse drama or lyric poem or sonnet? Pipa passes. It's a verse drama. It's a verse drama by Robert Browning. It's a verse drama by Robert Browning. Next, The Buried Giant. It's a fantasy novel by Dash, published in March 2015. The novel follows an elderly Briton couple, Axel and Beatrice, living in a fictional post-Arthurian England in which no one is able to retain long-term memories. It's a fantasy novel set in post-Arthurian England. Who wrote this novel? So be very careful about these two things. It's a fantasy novel and setting, it's a post-Arthurian England setting, right? So who wrote this novel, The Buried Giant? Salman Rushdie, Kazuo Ishiguro, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or Alejo Carpentier? Who wrote this novel, The Buried Giant? Salman Rushdie, Ishiguro, Marquez, Carpentier. Tell me. It is by Kazuo Ishiguro. Again, novels of Kazuo Ishiguro are very famous. The Remains of the Day, Never Let Me Go, The Buried Giant, A Pale View of Hills, When We Were Orphans. So many novels he has written, especially the themes of his novels. That's also very important. Okay, so it's by Kazuo Ishiguro. And it is set in post-Arthurian England. Okay, next. Jungle Nama is a graphic verse novel written by Dash and illustrated by Pakistani-American artist Salman Toor. It is a verse adaptation of the medieval Bengali tale about the Sundarbans forest goddess Bon Bibi. So who wrote this graphic verse novel? Amruta Patil, Sarnath Banerjee, Amitav Ghosh, or Tarun Tejpal? As we all know, Amruta Patil is a very famous name when it comes to graphic novels. She wrote Curry, the graphic novel on the lesbian protagonist, Curry. So who wrote this graphic verse novel, Jungle Nama? Who wrote this graphic verse novel, Jungle Nama? It's about Bon Bibi. She is the goddess of Sundarbans. Who wrote this work? It is by Amitav Ghosh, obviously. Amitav Ghosh. Okay. So again, it's a very recent work, right? It was published in 2021. It was published in 2021. Right? So Jungle Nama, it's a graphic verse novel by Amitav Ghosh. And it was first published in 2021. It is Amitav Ghosh's first book in verse. It is Amitav Ghosh's first book in verse. And the story explores the themes of greed and ecological misadventure. Be very careful about these particular themes which have been explored in South Asian literature, right? Be very careful about these themes. Like here, a very prominent theme is ecological misadventure, the exploitation of nature, right? So this story explores themes of greed and ecological misadventure. Ghosh states that the story is an allegory for human-caused climate change. It's a work or it's an allegory for human-caused climate change. Amitav Ghosh has written a lot about climate change, right? He wrote The Great Derangement, which also talks about climate change. And here also, it's a very important work, Jungle Nama. It is his first work in verse, published in 2021. It is also an allegory for human-caused climate change. Please remember, Amitav Ghosh has written very prominently about climate change in the contemporary era. Right. So that's clear, I guess. Let's move on to the next question. Okay. The Bishop of St. Prax's Church wants a lapis lazuli as big as a dash on his tomb. So how big does he want this lapis lazuli to be? Should it be as big as a ripe mango, or a Jew's head, or goat's head, or ripe peach? We know the Bishop of St. Prax's Church. Again, it's a very famous poem by Browning. Here the bishop is very busy about, how his tomb should be decorated after his demise. He's a very materialistic person. As a bishop, he's a very materialistic person. He's not really bothered about his afterlife or about some good deeds. He's a very materialistic person who is concerned about how his tomb should look like after he dies, right? So the bishop of St. Prax's Church wants a lapis lazuli as big as a Jew's head on his tomb. He wants the lapis lazuli to be as big as a Jew's head, as big as a Jew's head on his tomb. Okay, such details, textual details are very important. So try to read poems as much as you can, especially the important poems of important poets. Okay. Right. So before we wrap up, again, a reminder for you all that from tomorrow onwards, we're starting our NET GRF countdown sessions, right? And the session will start from 8 p.m. Usually our live sessions start from 9 p.m. onwards, but from tomorrow, this will be special sessions of 2 hours long, right? And here you will get both paper 1 and paper 2 sessions. Clear? So from tomorrow onwards, don't forget to tune in from 8 p.m. Right? So see you all tomorrow. Take care, keep studying, and good night.